Okay, sorry about that. I just wasn't sure whether the screen was showing. So we are now up to part 4, where we're going to discuss the theories of delinquency and interventions to stop young people committing crime from very early on in their lives. Your down arrow doesn't want to work. All right. So this can be clustered into 3 groups. So individual propensity approaches, which is the theory of moral development. This is Kohlberg's theory of moral development based on the theories of Piaget. Don't worry too much about remembering the names because you will do a lot about them when you do psych of crime. But the individual propensity approaches are things within the individual. And the theory of moral development is that we go through stages of moral development in our lives, starting from the moment that we're born, that lead to how we think as adults. And I'll go through those a bit more on the next page. Social interactionist approaches are about how children relate to their social environment, how their social development is affected by the environment around them, and how they learn from it. So familial role models and behaviour within the family, how attached children are to their parents. And remember, we discussed attachment theory last week. Attachment theory is a very big theory. The general age-graded theory of crime is how certain life events and periods of transition in our lives affect our propensity to commit crime. And the integrated factor approach or pathways approach is about finding the pathways for children to be attached to learn conforming behaviour and to create social bonds with their families and community. Okay, so let's go back using this to Kohlberg's theory. So at the pre-conventional level, we've got small children. The rules are external rather than internal. So they just understand what the rules are and they follow them. They'll avoid punishment imposed by authority figures and perception of self dominates. And they're worried about the consequences from their parents. Conventional, we're now moving on to older children who will internalise many of society's rules, obey the rules made by others, and the perspectives of others are recognised. This is all about social relationships. So we're talking primary age children here. The post-conventional level is young adults, so late high school moving into young adulthood. They now can differentiate between their self and the rules of society. So they will define their own values using self-chosen but universal moral principles. Some laws will violate those basic moral principles, and the perspectives of all individuals are important. And this is where you have your own ethical and moral principles. Now, reading that back to you, I can see that there are some things happening in the world at the moment that really might challenge that post-conventional level of thinking that the perspectives of all individuals are important, because I think we're losing that a little bit at the moment, where people are not willing to listen to and respect the perspectives of others. So it'll be interesting to see whether any new theories come out down the track in light of everything that's gone on in the world at the moment. So now we're going to talk about some specific intervention programs. What can actually be done to try and interfere with this line of people going on to cause trouble in the community by, committing crime? Well, the purpose of interventions, excuse me, is to divert young people from a negative to a positive pathway. Once we've recognised a child who is at risk, then we need to look at the interventions that could help to stop the offending to not occur in the first place. That's what we're trying to do, stop it in the first place. So we might look at how to help young people do something as simple as transition between schools. How can we support them with this? The aim could be to just get them into schools, but an unintended consequence could be them not going on to commit crime if we help them with that transition. I know that a lot of young people who are in defence families really struggle when they transfer interstate, because the education systems from state to state can be so different and at different levels. They might transfer to a state and find that their age group or their cohort is learning work that they did 12 months ago, or they could go there and find that the cohort is 12 months ahead. So it can be really, really difficult for children in those circumstances to remain engaged with their schooling and to become attached to people when you're moving all the time. That's been a really big ongoing issue with young people in defence families. So the features of this is that it's guided by the knowledge of risk and protective factors. It can take place early in life or at crucial transition periods. We're not necessarily aiming to reduce specifically crime, but address the risk factors, and it can often include multiple components targeting multiple risk factors. So there's 3 types of interventions, and it would be good for you to know what each of these are. So a universal intervention is for everyone. You're not just choosing a group. So you might, I'll use a school example throughout all of this, you might decide to have an intervention that targets the whole school. A selected intervention might be just for groups judged to be at increased risk. So we might find a group that has a specific increased risk or for whom the risk factors are already there. So we might target 1 year level. So we might say, oh, the year 4s this year, there's a bit of a problem there, so we're only going to target this at the year 4s. And then an individual or targeted intervention is only at specific individuals who already have a problem. So we might have a child in kindy who's biting and kicking and creating an issue within that class, or we'll call it prep. So the intervention might be targeted specifically at that child. So 3 different types of interventions, important to understand them, and they're represented visually so that you can see that universal is for the most, selected for a smaller group, and targeted at a very small group or individuals. Where can this happen? Well, it can happen in lots of different places. So in the home, you might have social support people who come to the home and give support. This can be even nurses who are coming into the home after a baby is born to provide some assistance to the mum as she's navigating becoming a mum for the first time. Can be in a preschool setting or a school. You might get a community group like Triple P. The Triple P parenting program is run through the University of Queensland, and they might come in to do a presentation. This is universal because it's given to everyone at the centre and not given to a select group that may be considered to be at risk. So getting outside vendors to come in and do presentations. It can be done in the community, at playgroups, healthcare centres, churches, anywhere where there's a group of people together that have a need. And what are the types of programs that they're going to be doing? Well, educational programs, school programs, focusing on the skills that you can see there. Problem solving and decision making are really, really big skills that young children need to learn. And play-based learning is always a really, really good way to teach young children because they don't realise they're learning while they're playing. So it's a really good structured way of helping young people. Family support programs, having nurses, as I said, or midwives coming into schools, into homes to help with information on care, nutrition, parenting, including discipline. And combined family support and early education. There's some evidence that this combination is most effective in reducing antisocial behaviour. So providing support for the family as well as early education. So what are some examples of this being out in the community? Well, Elmira, which is the name of a town, did an early infancy project where they had a nurse going into the homes of 400 first-time mothers who were young, poor and or single. So what type of intervention was this? Well, it was a selected intervention because they were selected as they were at risk and they received differing levels of support. So this is obviously a longitudinal survey because they looked, or research because they looked at it over quite a long period of time. And what they found was that at the age of 4 for the child, the mother had better parenting skills. She was more likely to be in work and have fewer subsequent pregnancies, so smaller families and planned pregnancies. They were more widely spaced. Many of them returned to education and there was less abuse and neglect. because they encouraged these women to have a sense of control over their lives and their future fertility. They increased their involvement in their child development and improved the health of their children. But note in this one, they targeted the mums and not the children. So working with the mums had that flow-on effect for the children. The Perry Preschool study looked at 58 disadvantaged African American 3 to 4-year-olds and a control group. Remember that the control group here received nothing. So they did not receive any sort of program at all. A daily preschool program was provided in addition to weekly home visits. So this was a selected intervention again for specific disadvantaged children. And what did they find? Well, they followed these young kids from the age of 3 to 4 up to the age of 40. So this was another longitudinal study. And what did they find? Well, the young kids that got the intervention had higher school achievement, higher rates of literacy and employment, less offending, less antisocial behaviour, and less welfare dependency. So they were more likely to be homeowners, and there was a big cost benefit. So if you ask any government why they don't implement some of these programs in our communities here where children are very disadvantaged, they'll just say they can't afford it. But the money is saved in the long run because we're spending less money on people getting into the criminal justice system. So we're saving a lot of money in the long run. All right. This program began in 2001, and I'm going to actually try and play this one. We'll see what happens when I try and play it. Okay. All right. It's not going to work for me, but what I would like you all to do is to watch it. Please make sure that you do. I think I can probably watch it if I do this. Here we go. Hopefully you can see that screen.
There is compelling evidence that the early years of life establish the foundations for adulthood. When children grow up in environments characterized by significant levels of hardship, it can have a damaging effect on their development, possibly resulting in unemployment, mental health problems, social isolation, and involvement in crime. Raylene Hartland and her 4 children have done it tough. They're near the freezer. Years in a destructive relationship left her unable to cope with her children.
Threw my head off, walked around the house slamming doors, not coping with it at all.
The new start with partner Stephen Lockwood was marred by the money worries of life without a job.
I'd be frustrated, I'd be angry, and I just have to go for a walk to cool off.
I'd get upset because he's upset and the kids are upset. One great big circle.
Evidence shows that early intervention programs can make a dramatic difference to the well-being of children, families, and their communities. Mission Australia and Griffith University have pioneered an early intervention approach called the Pathways to Prevention Project in Brisbane. After a marriage breakdown, Louise Scott's children started having nightmares and became withdrawn at school.
I stayed told because there was someone you could talk to. They were willing to find information if you couldn't find it. They didn't know the answer. They would look up things, contact with for me.
Pathways to Prevention shows that mobilising resources to support children, families and their communities before problems emerge is more effective and cheaper than intervening when problems have become entrenched.
Only the nice and the not overstayed.
Thanks to Pathways, things are looking up for Raylene Hartland. With partner Steve Lockwood has a job, so they'll be celebrating this Christmas.
I've learned how to become patient with the kids instead of letting them get to it.
And what way did it?
kind of showing me how I can deal with it instead of having to try and deal with it on my own.
Around there. My children give me love. Love's the most important thing.
The Scott family are a lot happier now. They all have a range of new skills and more confidence, and the children are doing well at school.
Pathways Conventional was the greatest program my kids might have ever done. And it helped tremendously. So I recommend it to anyone.
With the continued generosity of governments, individuals, and corporate donors, we hope to keep the vision of Pathways alive. That is, children, families, and communities are all enjoying positive social and economic outcomes. Caring for today's children will have long-term economic and social benefits for all Australians.
Okay, so 7 schools were targeted in Brisbane for that program, which was run in conjunction with Griffith University and I believe is still going, but they targeted families with 4 to 6-year-olds commencing school. They had 2 intervention screens, the preschool intervention program called PIP and the family called FIP. So in the PIP, teachers were educated when they were coming to the school and working with the children of what the program was all about, and it was about communication and social skills. And then the FIP program did these things: parent training, playgroups which were culturally based, counselling and crisis support, welfare assistance and adult support groups. And what did they find? Well, PIP had a positive effect on reducing problem behaviour for boys and increasing teacher ratings of readiness for school. So if they were in prep, they were ready to start school. Children who were worse off initially showed greater improvements, slightly improved grade 1 school performance. Anything that's an improvement is great. But the greatest effect was for those whose parents were participating in the FIP components and the children were receiving PIP. So you don't just target one factor or take one approach, but look at all the factors, and it works best when everyone is involved, the school and the children. But what are the features of successful programs? What do they need to be able to show to be successful? Well, they need to be well resourced. If they don't have the resources to run the program, it's not going to work. They need to be implemented by well-trained staff. Just throwing people in and saying, here's the program, off you go, needs to be put out the door. We need to have well-trained staff based on explicit theories, because though they're varied in though they are varied in nature and there is no one correct approach, we need to base them on theories, because remember, we need to understand why. Why are we targeting these things? Why are we doing this? Some form of development of parental capacities, resources and skills, sometimes through parent training and sometimes through more broad family support. So remember, if the children are working really well at school and getting all this training at school, if they're still going home to dysfunctional families, inconsistent discipline and all the other risk factors that we discussed, then it's not going to work. So it needs to be operated simultaneously in multiple domains, including children, their parents and their teachers. Okay, that concludes part 4, where we discuss theories and interventions. And in the last part today, we are going to be turning our attention to preventing re-offending.